it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I have read recently. So it has been a hot second since I've done a recent reads video, so I have a ton of books to talk about today. There's some that I'm going to go into more than others because some I have more to say than others, so I hope that's okay with you guys, but I kind of went through a spell where I wasn't really reading a lot, so it didn't make sense to do a recent reads video, and then I just never actually filmed one once I had read a lot, so now I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books to talk about. So I'm going to try and keep this as short and sweet as possible. I do thankfully have an iced coffee to get me through, or else I would die. Not to be dramatic or anything, but let's just get into some spoiler-free thoughts about the books that I have read recently. So the first book I have to talk about today is one that I can't say a lot about, and that's because it's a sequel. What? I actually read a sequel? I continued with a series that I had been meaning to for forever? Yes, I did. Character development. So I finally picked up Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. Yay! I've had this book for a very long time, and I've been meaning to read it for a very long time, and then we read Scythe for Bookmarked. I don't even know what month it was. Like, I have 3 bookmarked books on this list, so they're all starting to blur together, especially because I haven't talked about them. But after finishing Scythe, my love for that book was renewed, and then Hannah had read this and she was like, you need to read it. So then I was like, yes, I need to read it. I already knew I did need to do it. I don't know what happened in that sentence, but I knew that I had to read it. So she gave me like the final push that I needed to pick it up, and I'm so glad that I did. It was wild. Like, I knew that it was going to be good because Scythe, like, a lot of people read it and liked it, but then when Thunderhead came out, I feel like everyone was talking about the series way more than they had been before, so that's when like the series really got hyped up, and I had heard so many things about the sequel, and it's not very often where a sequel is more hyped up than the first book, so I was intrigued to say the least, and so many things happened in here. Like, the last like 100 or so pages, I was like, what is going on? Like, what? I hope you enjoyed that dramatic reenactment, but like, I was so confused. I couldn't predict anything that happened in this, and to me that is the mark of a great sequel. Even though I never predict anything, I like really, it was left field, like I was just like slapped across the face with it. Wow, where did that come from? So it was super enjoyable. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and if you haven't checked out this series, you should definitely do so. And the final, I don't know if it's actually the final question mark, book is coming out in the fall, so now is the time to pick this series up. Woo! Speaking of bookmarked, the next book is Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. We read this in an unknown month. Like I said, it all blurs together. I think it was May. It was May. Yes, this was our May book of the month, and it was a reread for all of us. And unfortunately for me, I didn't enjoy it as much as the first time around, which makes me really sad, but I will leave a link for the live show down below for you guys so you can hear more of our in-depth thoughts about it. But in case you aren't familiar with it, which would be kind of surprising, but this is the first book in the Infernal Devices trilogy by Cassandra Clare, which is a prequel to the Mortal Instruments series, and I'm not like a huge Cassandra Clare fan, but I do really enjoy the Infernal Devices. It was my favorite of her books, so I was excited to read it again, but I don't know if it was just the mindset I was in or what, but I just didn't quite connect with it as much as I had wanted to, unfortunately. But unlike the Mortal Instruments, this is set in Victorian London, which is just like the greatest, and you find out a little bit more about the world and the underworld of the Shadowhunter universe, which is really cool. But I just don't have the nostalgia attached to it that Hannah and Zoe do, so I didn't enjoy it quite as much as they did. It was a solid read for me, but definitely around a 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I'm hesitant to change my rating because I think just the fact that I had to read it under a time limit did kind of change my enjoyment of it, especially because I wasn't exactly in the mood for it. So I think I'm going to stick with my original rating from when I first read it of 4 out of 5 stars, and then maybe I'll reread it again at some point in the future and see how I really feel about it. Next is If I'm Being Honest by Emily Wibberly and Austin Siegemund-Broka. So this was one of my most anticipated releases for the year. I was so excited for it because I read the debut by this author duo, which was Always Never Yours, and that focused on Romeo and Juliet, and I loved it. I thought it was so cute, really fun, and a nice surprise. But I went into that one with no expectations, so I think because I had expectations going into this one, it did change my enjoyment of it. So If I'm Being Honest, on the other hand, is a Taming of the Shrew retelling, which I was fascinated by because I don't think I've ever experienced a Taming of the Shrew retelling. I know there's a movie, I think it's 10 Things I Hate About You, but I've never seen it. And I can hear Zoe gasping about that because she was shocked by that, but I have never experienced a Taming of the Shrew retelling. I have read the original Taming of the Shrew, and I read it for a university class actually, so I studied it. So having some familiarity with the story, I was intrigued by this. So this follows Cameron, who is the queen bee at her LA private school, which has like a bunch of like really prestigious students. They're not prestigious in terms of being like really smart, but they have like really big shot parents. So she kind of rules the school a bit Regina George style, but she is known for being very, very honest. She always says what's on her mind, doesn't really filter herself, and just is like, here it is, like it or not, take it or leave it. That's how it is. So this can get her into trouble, but she hasn't really cared until the guy that she has a crush on is like, no, like you're just a straight up bitch and I'm not interested in you because of that. So she decides to tame herself and try and make amends for all the bad things that she has done. And she kind of goes through a list of like trying to apologize to these people and make everything right again so she can get this guy. But then her feelings end up getting a little bit muddled and she is just left very confused about everything and wondering who she is and what she really wants. So like I said, my expectations were super high going into this because one, I had already read something by these authors and really liked it, and two, I had seen great reviews for this. So I thought this was like a surefire 4 or 5-star book, but I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars because I just didn't have the connection with the characters that I really wanted to. I felt like there was something missing with the story, and it was just kind of going through the motions of her kind of going through almost a checklist of apologizing to people, and it never really got further into it. There were things that I enjoyed. I did like some of the characters, even if I didn't feel like I had that connection with them. I liked the fact that Cameron was unlikable, and she wasn't really like any other characters that I feel like I've read too often, especially in YA, so that was interesting to me. But watching her relationship develop and her develop as a character, I felt like was a little bit stunted at times, but I did enjoy the romance and the way it ended up going. It just ultimately, there was something missing there that made it so I didn't enjoy this book as much as I had hoped to, unfortunately. But I do think it was a pretty good read. I just don't think it's one that I will really remember. Next is another bookmarked book, and if you follow along with the Bookmarked Book Club, then you know that we've had some pretty bad luck with our past couple of reads, and this is the book where it started going downhill. So that book is I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. I actually already have this book in my to unhaul pile because I have no desire to keep it. I just didn't like it at all. But we decided to read this book because we did a poll, first of all, so it wasn't just our choice, but second of all, we all have read Radio Silence by Alice Oseman and really, really loved it. And this sounded like it could be a really fun story too, and the reviews seemed really good, so we took a shot and it didn't really work out, but that happens. So once again, I'll link our live show down below. It gets really ranty. The yeeting of the brick is a big topic in it. If you want to know what the hell I'm talking about, then you can watch that live show. But this book is all about the Ark, which is this band, and it is about the main character Angel, who is going to meet the Ark for the first time. So she's so excited. She's a huge fangirl, and it's about fandom culture really, but it's told in dual perspective, from the perspective of Angel, a fan, and also from the perspective of one of the members of the band. His name's Jimmy. I forgot that, had to refer to my notes. That kind of tells you how I felt about this book. I did like Jimmy as a character though. He was one of the redeeming elements, but this book was all over the place. It was like you had to have a lot of suspension of disbelief and be like, yeah, that could happen, but like, wowzers, it was the most. I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars overall. It was like enjoyable in the beginning, but it took me a really long time to read, and I just feel like I didn't really get any payoff from that, unfortunately. So I don't really have much else to say about this book, honestly. I've kind of put it from my brain, but if you wanted to hear more thoughts, we talk about it a lot in the live show, and it's a time, so enjoy that. So after that, I decided to spend pretty much a whole week, and I vlogged the whole thing, so I'll link that down below for you guys, but I decided to read a bunch of adult romances, but then I ended up moving to reading just just Christina Lauren books. So I finished all the Christina Lauren books that I haven't read yet. So the first one that I hadn't read yet was Roomies, and this was the one that I was the most excited for, to be honest. It seemed the most like Josh and Hazel, which is my favorite of theirs. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm saying theirs, it's because it's two authors. Christina and Lauren are two authors. It's an author duo. If you didn't know that, I probably just blew your mind, because I know I was mind blown when I found that out. But Roomies follows the main character Holland, and Holland is always finding excuses to go to a particular subway station because she is obsessed with this guy who plays his guitar there. She has kind of made up a fantasy about him in her mind and hasn't really ever like actually talked to him until she ends up having an accident and he ends up saving her. And to repay him, she ends up getting him an audition for a Broadway show. But then she finds out that he is actually there on an expired student visa. He is Irish and he is there illegally. So they decide to get married so then he can stay there. And obviously that is the setup for disaster. But that plot brings to mind one of my favorite movies, which is The Proposal. Fantastic movie, so funny, just really enjoyable rom-com, but that's not what I got here. I was pretty disappointed with this. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, but I think it's kind of like a 2.5, 2.75. I found the romance very unbelievable, and I didn't like the lead up to it. I didn't really care for Holland as a character, especially because she had been like fantasizing about the love interest for so long and like never really told him, which I felt like was a little bit creepy. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way and made it really hard for me to get into the romance. But there were some funny parts, like there were some parts that made me laugh, which is what I would expect from the author duo. But a lot of this was kind of like I was born for this, really unbelievable for me. I struggled to buy the storyline that they were selling, and because of that, I was just kind of flipping through the pages and wanting it to be over and hoping that there would be a sex scene at least to kind of, because those were at least kind of interesting to read about, but the rest of it just was really flat for me. And I do like Broadway, like I'm not a huge Broadway fan, but I do enjoy that world, and like the synopsis sounds so good. It sounds very interesting, but it was just the execution didn't get me. I will say I thought the music aspect was really interesting. I liked the descriptions that came along there, but overall it just was a little bit disappointing, and I think once again it was a case of my expectations being too high, which I really do try and lower my expectations before going into books, but sometimes, especially with authors that are like auto-buy authors for you, it's hard to do that. So unfortunately I didn't really like this. But after that one I picked up my favorite Half Night Stand, and I enjoyed this one way more than I was expecting to. So for some reason I thought I was gonna like Roomies. I thought that I might not like this one. I wasn't really sure. And then Love in Other Words, which is the next one that I'm going to talk about, I didn't really think I would like this one either. But I actually ended up really enjoying both of these. But like I said, I'll talk about this one in a second. For now, I will talk about this one. So Millie is a professor and also a serial killer expert, which is a fun little fact about her, but her friend group is all these guys who also are professors at the same university as her. And there's a banquet coming up, so they all decide that they need dates and they go online dating and they go on this app, and Millie really struggles with sharing like serious parts of her life, so she kind of makes a persona where she can share those things, but she ends up matching with her very best friend who she happened to have a one-night stand with on the night that they decided they were going to do this, but then they decided, no, we're going to be friends, keep it platonic. But then as this other girl, which he doesn't know is her, they end up kind of starting a relationship and things get a little steamy, a little serious, and she doesn't know what to do as everything is going to chaos. So I actually listened to this one on audio, and I don't normally listen to romance books on audio. I kind of started to recently, but like there's just something about someone reading a sex scene to me. It kind of weirds me out. But I actually enjoyed the audiobook for this one, sex scenes aside. I thought it was really good, and I think it helped me to connect with the characters more than I would have if I hadn't listened to it. I loved the friend group that was going on. I liked the fact that even though like you didn't get that much of the other boys, each character had a very distinctive personality, and I could see how their friend group worked, and that was really cool. And though the relationship was very frustrating because it was kind of like miscommunication, you know, secrets being kept, it was like, oh, come on, like if you're just honest and like speak your mind, then everything will be fixed. That is usually something that I hate, but I don't think it bugged me as much because this featured one of my favorite tropes, which is friends to lovers. I really enjoy that, so I could kind of get past some of the things that were a little bit annoying about it. Millie as a main character was pretty annoying and kind of unlikable, but also unfortunately for me, I found her very relatable, which was like a slap to the face, but you know, that happens sometimes. But she didn't annoy me so much that that I didn't like the book. I did end up really enjoying it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was cheesy, lighthearted, and fun. Definitely nothing that like made me think a lot, but I don't regret reading it at all. I thought it was a blast to read, to be honest. So the final Christina Lauren book that I had that I hadn't read yet was Love in Other Words, and this one I didn't know what to expect, but it blew me away, honestly. So Macy is kind of going through the motions of her life. She has a job that she loves, she's marrying a man who's older but financially secure, and it's kind of a bit of a loveless relationship, but it's comfortable. So everything is going according to plan until she runs into Elliot, who is her first love and her first heartbreak, and she spent so much time with him growing up, so seeing him kind of just completely sets her life off kilter. So the story alternates between the past and the present, and overall that just ends up giving you such a well-rounded love story. I was expecting a romance because that's usually what you get, like a steamy romance that's just cheesy and fun and lighthearted. That's what I've gotten with all the other Christina Lauren books that I've read, but this was a true love story where you get more of the emotional side of things, more of an impactful romance going on. It had the elements of fun and lightheartedness that their other books had, but it also packed a real punch, which was an unexpected but really nice surprise. This featured another one of my favorite tropes, which I don't really know like what the exact word for it, but basically when an old relationship ends up becoming a romance, that is something that I really love, and getting to see the past and the present in this made it feel so real, so it was done like incredibly well. I know it seems like I really loved this, and I did, but I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Maybe a 4.75. The reason that it's not a 5 is because the ending and the kind of thing that's going on in this book is there's this looming thing that has happened, but you don't know what it is, and usually I hate that, and I didn't really enjoy it that much, but like I could get past it in this book. But the reveal of what that thing was and the ending overall was a bit disappointing for me, and I didn't really enjoy it that much, but it didn't ruin my enjoyment of the story so much to take off like a full star rating. This is also the perfect romance if you love books and are a book lover, and I'm imagining that you are because you are on my channel. If not, I'm sorry that you got lost on YouTube. But it is such a bookish romance. It's like a slow burn bookish romance, which is just everything that I wanted and more. So it was great, and I highly recommend it. Next is Stargazing by Jen Wang. This is kind of a hard book to describe, honestly, because I didn't really understand the synopsis so well, and I think that you should just kind of go into it, so I'm not really going to give you much of a synopsis, but I will just say that reading this, the kind of plot twist that happened, I was not expecting it at all, and especially because I didn't know what to expect going into it, it really took me by surprise, and I ended up really liking it. So I know that's super vague, but if you are going to read this, definitely just go into it and read it, and I think you'll understand what I mean when you do read it. But this is a graphic novel, actually, which I haven't read one in a very long time, so I was really happy that I ended up enjoying the one that I ended up picking up. But this isn't out yet. I got this at Book Expo, and it is coming out September 10th, so definitely check it out. So I just have a couple more books to talk about. This next one I'm going to talk about really quickly just because it is another bookmarked book club pick, and that was Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. We read this in July, and we just did the live show recently, so I will link that down below for you guys. But once again, we didn't really like this book that much. When I read the synopsis, I thought it sounded super cool, but ultimately what I got didn't feel like what I signed up for, so I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars, and we go way into that in the live show and pretty much break this book down like point by point, so definitely check that out if you wanted some more thoughts on it. I'm sorry that I'm rushing through this. I have been filming for like an hour now, and I don't even know how long this video is going to be when I edit it, so yeah. And my final recent read is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. This was another letdown. So it's all about this girl who ends up being the wedding date for this guy that she doesn't even know. He just broke up with his girlfriend, and he's going to an ex's wedding, so he's like, I can't go and stand up in this wedding when I don't have a date. So they meet in the elevator briefly, and then she agrees to go and be his date. And I thought we were gonna get way more of the wedding, but we didn't. Like, the wedding's just a very brief part in this, and then there's a romance that I didn't care about. I didn't care about the characters or anything, so it was very forgettable, and I kind of just wanted to be done with it in the end, which I was happy when I was. So I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars as well. If you haven't watched my Reading Rush vlogs or don't follow me on Twitter or Instagram, then you might not know that I've been reading Harry Potter recently. So I am through with the first illustrated edition and the second one, but I'm currently halfway through the third one, which by the time this video goes up, hopefully I'll be done with it. I don't know, but it has been great to be back in the Potter universe again. These are all obviously 5 out of 5 stars. Still, upon rereading them, it's just nice to be welcome back home to Hogwarts every time I read it. It's just, oh, so good. I highly recommend a reread if you haven't. So those are all of my recent reads. I'm sorry that this video was so long. Thank you guys if you stayed until the end and listened to all my thoughts on these books. I hope you liked it. If you have also read any of these books, please let me know what you thought about them. I hope the ones that I didn't like you enjoyed more than I did. But if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click that subscribe button and then click that bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I post. I post new videos every week. And you can also follow me on all of my social media. All of my handles and links and all that stuff will be down below for you guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!